Welcome to today's Meet the Professor inaugural lectures. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Bejugal people on whose land you meet this afternoon and pay my respects to their elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guests who may be in the room. I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person today, but I wanted to say a few words about the importance of this event and to introduce our speakers, because introducing our new professors is one of my most enjoyable tasks, not just because their lectures leave me in awe of their achievements, but because they give us all a chance to recognise the passion and behind-the-scenes hard work of our most successful academics. These lectures represent a major career milestone, one I suspect our professors won't soon forget. I think the most meaningful aspect of these events is that they give friends, family, peers and students a rare glimpse into the full story of our new professors' backgrounds and the influences which have brought them to where they are today. And I'm honoured to introduce you to Professor Oya Demirbilek. Speaking first today, we have Professor Demirbilek from the Faculty of the Built Environment. Oya is a professor in industrial design hailing from Turkey. She has 2 PhDs, one from Bilkent University in Ankara and the other from Marmara University in Istanbul, both about designing for aging and involving older people in the design process. After her studies, Oya worked across Europe for the prestigious Art Center College of Design in Switzerland, as well as in academic and lecturing positions at the Middle East Technical University in Turkey. Professor Demirbilek is interested in visual language and product semantics, design research methods, inclusive design, and emotion-driven design. She's an award-winning designer herself, having exhibited her work nationally and internationally. She joined UNSW in 2000, and almost 20 years later, I think it can be safely said that she has found a true home here. Since arriving, Oya has been the Associate Dean of Education at Built Environment, Discipline Director for Industrial Design, and the Program Director for 2 Industrial Design postgraduate coursework programs. Oya also led the design, implementation and delivery of the first Built Environment MOOC called Re-Enchanting the City. Teaching is clearly a passion and a great talent. Professor Demirbilek has won a number of awards over her career and is also the author of 2 books and very many journal articles in top-tier design publications. Today, she will speak about accessible and inclusive design and the importance of designing cities and spaces which do not exclude those with a disability who are often invisible, as well as elderly people. Before I cede the stage, I would quickly like to acknowledge some of the more important people in Oya's life and career. Her late parents, Sevim and Necdet, acknowledgement also to Oya's husband, Rushtu, and sister-in-law, Nur. I believe there was also a possibility that Oya's 93-year-old mother-in-law may also have been able to come. Regardless of whether she made it, what a fantastic support to have. Professor Oya Demirbilek, congratulations. It is now time to present your inaugural lecture, Better Life in Cities for All with Accessible and Inclusive Design. Oya, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Professor Jacobs, for this warm introduction. It's a great honor to be here. And thank you all for coming in this cold and rainy day. Much appreciated. Now, what would you have in your mind if I was to ask you to give me an example of a technology that was designed for a specific disability, but now is mainstream? I think we should all have some today on us, and hopefully on silent. Mobile. Actually, it's the touchscreen of smartphones. That technology was invented by a company called Fingerworks back in 1989. It was specially designed for people with repetitive strain injuries, and people with dexterity problems. And that company has been bought by Apple in 2005. So you all have a piece of technology that was designed for an invisible disability. I have been in academia since 91, like Professor Jacobs said. I'm a design researcher and educator. I gave my first lecture for T3 this morning. I'm a jury designer and accredited first aider, mental health first aider, and I'm also a carer for my beloved husband for the past 10 years, helping him through a neurological disorder. There are so many people that played a role in my journey, so I would like to say a big thank you to all of them here. First, of course, my late parents. Thanks to them, I traveled the world, I learned different languages, I met so many people, and they had a huge impact on who I am and where I am today. Then next comes my husband, for encouraging me to be my very best from the day we met. Then comes Noor, my sister-in-law, for always supporting me, and Noor has been the one to introduce me to Dr. Lance Green in '97, when Dr. Lance Green was the head of program for industrial design. Sadly, Dr. Green passed away in 2016, and he was the one to encourage me to apply to my current role. Then coming to UNSW, I had to go through many promotion applications, from senior lecturer to professor, and I had wonderful mentors along the way. For my promotion to associate professor, Rob Freestone, Martin Loosemore, Susan Thompson, Eric Soey, and his lovely wife Anne Soey supported me. Then for my promotion to professor, I knew I had to get mentors, and lots of them. So I was very lucky to have the support of 10 mentors. First, a formally appointed mentor, Gary Vellen, who was incredibly generous with his time and advice. Then Chris Tisdale, who just put me on the right track since day one. Then I had 4 of my formal mentors, Rob, Martin, Susan, and Noor, Alexanes, Bruce Judd, Sisi Zlatanova, and Bob Fox. I would also like to say a very big thank you to my dean, Helen Lockhead, and my head of school, Bruce Watson, for their full support. So it doesn't happen without support. Before coming to Australia, I lived in 6 different countries and mostly in Europe. I forgot to say that my husband was the mastermind behind our move to Australia. And before joining UNSW, I studied and worked in Europe, and I did some freelance work in Switzerland. I taught industrial design in Metu, my former university, and I also taught industrial design in Art Center College of Design, La Tour de Paix at Le Château de Sully. A little castle like this, refurbished with modern interiors. That was the time when Uwe Banzen was the director. And if we have any car enthusiasts in the room, not sure, he was the designer behind the 4 Taunus P4 and 4 Capri MKL. Now, I would like you to think about a time where you had to buy a kitchen appliance. Imagine you're in a big store. What are you looking at first? How do you compare objects? Why did you select this kettle and not the other one? What made you make up your mind? This is one of my research areas of interest. It looks at the way we perceive and interpret products based on the design language and the visual appearances. Another important part of my research involves working with people as co-designers in the research process, and mostly with old people. In the image on the left, we were testing some virtual reality environments and looking at their perception of the virtual environment, as well as getting their feedbacks on how they can interact in such an environment, which was in a bathroom. And in the image on the right, this is a much younger group of participants, and it was about kitchen appliances, and we had people that love to cook. This quote sums up why co-designing is so important for me. A person with a disability has to be innovative just to get through the day. Imagine how that mindset helps a team. This is actually valid not just for people with disabilities, but for all of us. We are all experts in the way we live our lives, so we have a lot to contribute. And co-designers provide research teams with valuable insight on why they do things, how they do things, and what they really need. In my teaching, I love to teach empathy and design research in design-related courses in industrial design. I also teach, as Professor Jacobs mentioned, in a fully online multidisciplinary course called Re-Enchanting the City. And that course is a byproduct of the massive online open course, the MOOC, that we created a few years ago. And that MOOC is one of the main reasons why I'm so interested in the topic of my talk today. 5 years ago, our former dean and head of school had the idea to offer a global MOOC. And I was Associate Dean of Education at the time, so I embraced the project with great enthusiasm. It took us 3 years. We designed and created it. And the course focuses on the collaborations among built environment professions. And we do this through a case study, which is Central Park. And we look at the problems for design and development of big urban scale projects. But through that, we discuss the many ways how we can make hyperdense cities green, livable, and poetic. So this was the first such course for the faculty, and we successfully offered it in 2016 to 9,169 participants in 60 different countries. It was highly ranked for career advancement for urban design, landscape design, and interior design. Now, another question for you. Have you ever had a time when you could not do something that you usually can do well? You had, I can see nods. Can you remember how it felt? Oh, I know what yours was. So most common disabilities are invisible, and that's a number like 80%. And these are things like arthritis, musculoskeletal disorders, nervous system disorders, heart disease, respiratory problems, and we don't see them. So, and any one of us can become disabled at a certain point in life or overcome a disability, and we may end up permanently disabled or temporarily disabled. And a person walking in the street, talking on their mobile phone is considered situationally disabled. Yeah. So the environments we live in and the products and objects and system we interact with, they have a huge importance on our extent of ability or disability, and also on the experience we get through them. And this gets even worse when we think that we are predicted to reach 9.4 billion in 2050, with close to 17% of that above the age of 65, with 75% of the population living in cities, and cities that actually occupy 3% of the world at the moment. And today we have more than half of the population already living in cities. That number back in 1900 was 10%, so it's a huge increase of people living in cities. And this is where people agglomerate at the moment. So you can see the problem areas. And think about 80% of disabilities are invisible, we're not aware. 1 in 3 people have a disability or care for someone that has one. And in Australia alone, there are 4 million people suffering from arthritis. 2 models of disability. The one on the left is the medical model, where the person with the disability is the problem. And it focuses on the medical profession and focuses on the cure and alienating the effects. The problem on the right is the social model that sees the social barriers or physical barriers as the problem. So that becomes a design problem, this one. And disability is seen as mismatched human interactions. It's when we don't fit with environments or products. And this circle describes exclusion and inclusion. The left one shows how people can be shut in or shut out. And the right one is the ideal, when there are no barriers either way. Many industrial design outcomes are invisible in our day-to-day life because they would be embedded in the fabric of buildings and work in the background to make our experiences as comfortable as possible. So think about hardware fittings, from kitchens to bathrooms, from lighting. Next time you enter a room or turn on the light, think about who might have difficulties operating that door handle or that light switch, and under which circumstances. So a short exercise for you, very short. This is a doorbell. I would like you to think about, how would you ring it? Would you ring it with a finger or a thumb? Fingers? Lots of fingers, yeah? Wife, any thumbs? Wow. We do have a few thumbs, and it's not who I would have imagined. Yes, normally your answers should show us how designers can impact and change our lives. Because the older you get, the likelier you are to press it with a finger, your index finger. And the younger you are, most probably you would use your thumbs, because you text on your phones and then you play console games as well. It will have been very well trained. But how does industrial design, which is my profession, fits and is visible in the city? A city is way more bigger than the case study we had in the MOOC course. Well, there are many pros and cons of living in a city, and many of these can be improved with good design. Accessibility being one of the areas. So how do we find our way in a city? Information design, road signage systems, bus and subway maps. All of these help us to make sense of our surroundings. They help us, they guide us so that we can go wherever we want on time and unharmed. So they kind of control people and they hurt people, but in a benevolent way. Everyone has interacted with this. This is the Sydney iconic pedestrian button with audio tactile system. It was designed in 1984 by Nielsen Design. It helped make the city pedestrian friendly as well as accessible, and it's also helping people with vision and hearing impairments. Vienna has installed same-sex couple crossing light signals, and Melbourne has introduced a woman crossing light signals. It's just a very small attempt at responding to the unconscious bias we have in our brains, because we're so used to see a male figure in those red lights. This countdown timer is from Sydney, and it responds to our behavior of impatience when we wait at the lights, and also our tendency to overestimate the time that we have waited, and also the time left to cross safely. And this one is new. They are the new in-ground pedestrian light signals tested in Sydney at the moment. And they turn red to signal that you have to stop. And when they turn off, you can cross safely. And they were designed for people walking and texting in the street. So for situationally disabled people. Red lights are among the most dangerous spots in the city for pedestrians. So this one is a temporary traffic light that was installed in Lisbon by Mercedes-Benz. It features a red dancing stick figure, but the beauty is that this dancing figure attracts people's attention, and they stop and wait, so they stay, they are safer. But there's another component of people participation, which is they can get into a box and dance, and their dance is translated directly into the red light. So that's quite fun and playful, and it kind of creates all these communal moments and social connections. This is another similar kind of example from Canada, from a company called Daily Tous les Jours. They collaborated with a scientist, a biology expert on animal cooperation, and a local musician. So what it is, the street becomes an enormous musical instrument. And these swings have, they are color-coded, and in each one is programmed musical instrument sounds. If you play them on their own, they all play some tunes, but if you play them together, they start playing more complex melodies. And there's even a secret mode when all of them play together. I think there's a symphony or something that goes on. So it's just a beautiful, playful, it's kind of a metaphor to remind us that we need to keep harmony in our life and we need to collaborate with people. But what does better really mean? Better for whom when we say better? Who decides what's better? How do we know a city is better than another one? When you look at the rankings for cities, some of them are reduced to technological monitoring and big data collection, nothing to do with humans, really. And current livability indices suggest that if a city has a Mediterranean climate, then it's a livable city. So how to decide and how to prioritize? The number of potential principles is overwhelming. This image is self-explanatory. It's from Guangzhou in China. When I saw this, it reminded me of a quote from William Gibson that says, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." So the World Association of Major Metropolises proposes 4 basic principles for cities: ecology, economics, politics, and culture. Ecology is first, and it's not in alphabetical order. And they also underline that any decision made should be the outcome of open dialogue with the people living in the cities. So in other words, co-designing cities with the inhabitants. As it is the case with most disabilities, most living species in cities, in urban life, are also invisible. Animals, plants, insects. We tend to forget that cities are comprised of, shared and made by animals, plants, fungi, microbes, atoms, many other living and non-living beings, together with technologies and materials. Experts estimate that there are 2 million known animal and living species known, and that makes only 25% of them, so we don't know most of it. And by 2050, we are going to lose half of it. On 25th of July this year, Australian architects joined the Global Architects Declare movement, and they declared climate and biodiversity emergency. Losing biodiversity and species is described as burning a library and not knowing the names and the contents of the books we are losing. And this is by Leahy and Lee in the conversation. Species are potential blueprints for solutions to problems, cures to diseases, inspiration for new technologies and innovations, and sources of materials. We live in the age of the humans, and design as a human-centered, creative, problem-solving activity has played a big role in creating many of the material and cultural problems. As such, environments, buildings, products, and services, they benefit humans above all else. And wildlife, especially wildlife in cities, has remained invisible in the planning and the design of our cities. For example, birds migrate at night under cover of darkness, and especially little ones. And then when they see light emanating from tall buildings, they get disoriented. And when that happens, they emit special calls, and they call more birds to the same location. The more birds come, the more birds collide and die. So today, more than ever, we have to redevelop empathy towards urban wildlife. And careful and thoughtful design can help make the presence of urban wildlife visible, as well as telling us about their needs and also the benefits of living among them. This is a model for human-centered determinants of health and well-being with lots of interdependent layers. I just would like to change the center of this by this one for a more inclusive multi-species model. So most disabilities are invisible. Most living species are invisible. And being invisible equals being excluded and ignored in the design and planning of our human habitats and also any man-made things. One skill that designers have is to think visually, and that allows them to see things from different perspectives. And to learn how to see is to learn how to design. And this is a powerful way in which we can all contribute to the design and planning of better environments, products, and services. So it boils down to seeing the invisible and developing compassionate empathy so that we can take action and help however we can. Now, in your day-to-day life, next time you see some barriers in the built environment or you see some exclusion happening, I would like you to think about what you can do to help alleviate it or prevent it. We all have a role to play, and we all can contribute to making better lives in cities for all, as places we all want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Oya. My name is Michael Ostwald. I'm Acting Dean of the Faculty of the Built Environment, and we're very proud that Oya has just joined our professoriate. I've been asked to say a few words at the end of her talk before we pass on to our next speaker. One of my first days here, the Vice-Chancellor reminded me that the word professor has two meanings in our contemporary world. In the first instance, it refers to a rank of esteem. It's a title given to an academic who shows leadership. But the word profess also relates to a capacity to take a position, to frame an argument, and to make a stand about something. Oya is excelled at both of those areas, as our Vice-Chancellor's introduction showed. Her presentation has also demonstrated the important role that industrial design can play in this world. All of us at some stage will experience levels of altered or reduced ability. We will all care for people with altered or reduced ability, and we will all be in those positions ourselves. Design is one of those tools that's often forgotten that can assist us to give people the opportunity to adapt and work. The other item that caught my attention in Oya's lecture was the word invisible, which appeared on 3 or 4 occasions. At the risk of sounding too much like a professor myself, there's a great French philosopher, Jacques Rancière, argued that a totalitarian government is most interested in keeping people invisible. It's when we make people visible and causes visible, we air them, we give people the opportunity to have their rights shown and displayed in public, their voice can be heard, and we can in turn respect and adapt to their needs. The whole issue of what is invisible and visible in society is core to us. I just want to close by saying that we in the Faculty of the Built Environment are most fortunate to have Professor Demirbilek as part of our community. She joins our university's esteemed professoriate, who are committed not only to hand and mind, but also to heart, to caring for our community, as our strategic plan outlines. We support Oya's endeavours to employ design in response to those people in the community who have differing levels of ability. We look forward to her continuing engagement with our students, her mentoring and support of staff, and her leadership of research. Please thank again Professor Oya Demirbilek.